The Senate will come to order. We have a motion from Senator Utke. Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate File 122, number 9 on general orders, be stricken and re-referred to the Committee on State Government, Finance, and Policy and Elections.
And Senator Utke, can you please confirm that this is that you're the chief author of the bill and the committee chairs are aware of the motion?
Mr. President, yes, this is my bill, and yes, I have talked with the chair of state government. This is a work comp insurance bill, and it does have rulemaking, so it has to go back to state government before it comes back to us again. Thank you.
Discussion on the Utke motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Continuing under motions and resolutions, Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, I move that Rule 26, or I pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following bills be made for special orders for immediate consideration. Mr. President, there's 3 bills. The sheet is on their desk.
Members, the first bill up for consideration is number 51 on general order, Senate File 1354, Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate File 1354 presents an opportunity for us to provide money for a law enforcement account that will be available for communities and law enforcement agencies to draw on if there are unusual circumstances that happen within their jurisdictions. Before we proceed any further, Mr. President, I would like to offer the A50 amendment.
Senator Weber offers the A50 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Weber moves to amend Senate File number 1354 as follows, page 1, line 22, delete. This is the A50 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Essentially, what this amendment does is that it offers some language that clarifies a few items. Number one, it removes the word state agencies. The purpose of these funds were not to reimburse the state agencies, and it is stated as such. It also makes note that this is not an annual appropriation, but rather it's a one-time appropriation of funds. We are changing the basic panel from 5 law enforcement officials to 2 sheriffs, 2 police chiefs, and the Commissioner of Public Safety. Also, we have indicated that for communities that are represented on that board, only one may be in excess of 50,000 individuals. And also we're providing a provision here so that if there was a community that is represented by one of the members of the board or the panel that has submitted a claim, that particular individual needs to recuse themselves. And we have the following enactment is the dates that we are applying retroactive to March 1st. And we are changing the $15 million allocation to $20 million. And out of fiscal year 2021. And it indicates again that this is a one-time transfer. And Mr. President, the other provisions of the bill basically provide that lists out those items that are compensable for the mutual aid compensation, and it also provides within this bill the format which those items are actually, it allows for the Commissioner to develop the format by which the application can be made for these funds. And we believe that at this point this is a bill that will allow everyone to be assured that their financial needs will be met as they participate and provide mutual aid in these circumstances. And Mr. President, that's a brief summary of the bill and the amendment, and I would ask for approval of the amendment at this point.
Members, we have the A50 amendment in front of us. It should be on your computer screens. If you do need a paper copy, just a reminder, get the page's attention, and we'll make sure that you get a paper copy of the amendment. So discussion on the A50 amendment. I see no discussion on the A50 amendment. All those in favor of the Weber A50 amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. We will pause briefly to gather the votes of the members in alternate locations. Members in the chamber, if you are an aye vote on the A50 Weber amendment, please stand at your desk. Members in the chamber, if you are an aye on the A50 amendment, please stand at your desk. Okay, you may be seated. Members in the chamber, if you are a no on the A50 amendment, please stand at your desk. All right, members, you may be seated. Thank you. I will call on Senator Franzen to report just the total number of ayes and nays on the A50 amendment for those voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 8 noes.
Senator Franzen reports 8 noes.
Mr. President.
Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have additional 2 noes, so a total of 10 noes.
Okay, thank you. Senator Franzen reports 10 noes. I will call on Senator Jasinski to report the total number of aye votes and the total number of no votes on the A50 amendment. Senator Jasinski, for those voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report 3 aye votes and 1 nay vote.
Senator Jasinski reports 3 ayes and 1 no. On a vote of 34 ayes and 33 nays, the amendment, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Members, we are back on Senate File 1354 as amended. I have a list of members who would like to speak. First, Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know you have a list of speakers, but I move to lay this bill on the table.
Senator Champion moves to lay Senate File 1354 on the table.
And, Mr. President, I would also like a roll call.
And he has requested a roll call. Motion to lay a bill on the table is not debatable. The Secretary will take the roll on the Champion motion to lay Senate File 1354 on the table. Members, just a reminder to vote at your own desk. After you vote, please exit the chamber through the front door. Members entering the chamber, please enter either through the retiring room or the side doors of the chamber. Members in the retiring room, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in room 303, please make your way down to the chamber to vote. And while they're on their way down, members in the president's office, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in room 323, please come to chamber to vote. While they're on their way down, members in room 237 and room 206, please come to chamber to vote. Rooms 237 and 206. I will call on Senator Franzen and report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report A for Senator Carlson.
Carlson votes no. Senator Franzen.
Mr. President, I report
I'm sorry.
A.
Please,
Aye.
Senator Franzen, that was an aye?
Aye, yes.
Okay. Carlson votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report I for Senator Clausen.
Clausen votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Mr. President, I report I for Senator Eaton.
Eaton votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Mr. President, I report I for Senator Eakin.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Mr. President, I report I for Senator Isaacson.
Isaacson votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Mr. President, I report I for Senator Kent.
Kent votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Mr. President, I report I for Senator Latz.
Latz votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Mr. President, I report I for Senator Marty.
Marty votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Mr. President, I report I for Senator Newton.
Newton votes aye. Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report I for Senator Wicklund.
Wicklund votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes no.
Anderson votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes no.
Coleman votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Nelson votes no.
Nelson votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Rarick votes no.
Rarick votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Senjum votes no.
Senjum votes no. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 31 ayes and 36 nays, the motion does not prevail. All right, members, we are back on Senate File 1354 as amended, and the list in front of me, I have Senator Dibble. Nope, okay. Senator Fateh, followed by Senator Torres Ray. We will go to Senator Torres Ray first. Senator Fateh will be next. Senator Torres Ray.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a few questions, if I could. related to the bill and to the amendment, to the amendment. And I would like to ask Senator Weber to please let me know the answers.
Senator Weber will yield, and just for clarification, we are on Senate File 1354. The amendment's already been adopted, but Senator Torres-Ray, Senator Weber will yield. Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. Senator Weber, I would like to know if you know how much money has been paid by the state of Minnesota, by cities and counties, due to police misconduct claims in the past few years.
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, Senator Torres-Ray, no, I do not.
Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, I would like to ask Senator Gazelka to yield for a question, please.
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Torres-Ray.
Senator Gazelka, do you by any chance know how much the state of Minnesota has paid for police misconduct claims in the last few years? I'm going to say 10.
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, Senator Torres-Ray, no, I did not look up that information.
Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask Senator Limmer for a question, if I may.
Senator Limmer will yield. Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you. Perhaps Senator Limmer, who is the chair of Judiciary, and they hear this, and we passed some criminal justice reform last year, and we heard constantly about these issues. Senator Limmer, how much did we pay for police misconduct claims in the past 10 years in the state of Minnesota?
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Torres-Ray, I don't know. We have not had any record of collecting such information by our committee. And Mr. President, while I have the floor, I have to ask whether or not this questioning has anything to do with the bill or the amendment. And I would suggest that the senator raising the questions would keep the discussion to the bill and to the amendment.
Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members, and thank you, Senator Limmer. The reason I asked the question is because behind the proposal of trying to figure out how do we fund the police, how do we fund public safety, we've had a very long-term conversation about how we do the business of policing our communities. How do we put policy behind the funding that we secure for law enforcement? Because the two go together. That's what we do here. We figure out where is the funding going to do, how is it going to be used, what kind of activities is this funding being used for? And we had very ample conversations about the reforms that we need to implement in law enforcement. And I believe that we agree because we passed a bill with bipartisan support to reform law enforcement. So members, I'm going to tell you how much money we have paid because that number actually exists and we talked about it multiple times because that triggered the conversation about why we need to reform the business of law enforcement. We have paid $68 million in the last 10 years, and most of that has been paid in the last 4 years. And that number is growing exponentially. And it's growing exponentially for multiple reasons. I don't have the time to go into that. But what I can tell you is that many of your cities, Mr. Chairman and members, are now going to have to use municipal bonds to pay for these claims because they are growing exponentially. So your counties and your cities are going to get in debt, and people are going to be making money. Banks are going to be making money to pay for police misconduct. So the question I ask this morning, members, and perhaps you talk about the relevance of this, is when we put money into paying for law enforcement, we really need to ask the question as responsible lawmakers, how is this money going to be used? Do we have enough transparency into the process? Do we know if we're training our law enforcement officers adequately? Are we investing enough in that training? What is the capacity of these cities, these counties to pay for that? So law enforcement officers are human beings, just like we are, that are in need of this training and this capacity and that skill to serve the community. They have some of the toughest jobs. And what we are saying here is we need to know how that happens. Is that training relevant today? Is it adequate? Are we paying for adequate training? Members, this bill doesn't do that. What this bill does is says, we're giving you money, do whatever you want. We don't want to know because we don't care to know. Just go ahead, use the money however you want. If we were responsible legislators who truly care about the job of law enforcement officers today, we actually will be asking the question. So members, I encourage you to vote no and go back to the conversation and really ask these difficult questions that we need to ask. My constituents are asking you to please be responsible and do not use the trauma and the painful moment that my city is living right now, and that many of you are using for your political gain and your political purposes to divide our community and to divide this body. I encourage you to please take a look at what you're proposing and see if that responds to the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Limmer, for what reason do you rise?
Point of order, Mr. President.
Please state your point of order.
I believe that senators should refrain from reflecting on motive when talking on the Senate floor of other members. I wish you would remind not only Senator Torres-Ray, but the body that that is part of our rules.
Members, as we go through the debate today on Senate File 1354, please keep your comments to the bill in front of us. And as you know, in our Senate rules, as well as in Mason's, we are not to impugn motives of other members. So that is just a friendly reminder. Next on the list is Senator Fateh, followed by Senator Gazelka. Senator Fateh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is an incredible day of significance for the people of Minneapolis, especially black people, especially for those who are fighting for justice and who believe in creating a system of public safety and criminal justice that protects all people equally. It is the first day of the jury selection in the trial of Officer Derek Chauvin, and I'm aware that the goal here is to capture the moment and show Minnesota that we're taking relevant business that is important and the world is watching. In fact, I agree, but it would seem a little bit out of touch for us to work on a tax bill today when all this is going on in our backyard. However, it is even more out of touch, even harmful and insulting and incendiary for us to pass a police funding bill on the first day of a trial about a police brutality and murder case. I know folks on both sides of the aisle are worried about experiencing civil unrest like we saw last year, and I do as well. I worry for my community. I worry for my neighbors, those who live in fear of police, and those who are worried about a repeat of last year's unrest. And as a South Sider, I can tell you that I'm also afraid, but I'm not afraid of my neighbors, but of a system, a racist system of public safety and criminal justice that continues to brutalize, murder, maim, and kill Minnesotans, including my constituents. And I'm afraid that the barricades that we're seeing around the government centers and centers of wealth that are being erected out are foreshadowing an outcome that we all dread, a verdict that would deny the justice for the murder of George Floyd. And that would escalate conflict with law enforcement and lead to more injury and deaths. But being a South Sider, I can also offer a little bit of insight as to what our role of the Senate can and should be. And that's to repair, de-escalate, and begin the long overdue process of change and healing. What we should be doing is continuing the work around police accountability and reform that we started last year. Today, on the day of the first day of the trial of the murder of George Floyd, if we were to pass legislation that would meaningfully change our system of policing and public safety, we could honestly say that may have prevented the death of George Floyd and others like him in the future, we would be doing much more to keep the peace in Minneapolis than all of the law enforcement presence that Minnesota taxpayer money can buy. George Floyd was murdered in our state in South Minneapolis less than a year ago. And as of now, we have yet to pass any meaningful police reform that would have prevented his death. We passed a package last year as a starting point. Senator Limmer, the author of the police reform package, called it a first step, and Majority Leader Gazelka said we would take up more meaningful reform during this legislative session. With the deadlines coming up, we have not yet done that. What we're doing here today is the opposite of reform. It is about doubling down on a system of occupation, coercion, control, and violence that has not provided public safety or security. And this account is an example of more police brutality begetting more police spending in a vicious cycle with no good outcome, no prospect of a brighter future for our over-policed communities and our communities of color. So, Mr. President, if our goal here today is to take action that will de-escalate the tension in the city of Minneapolis and assure Minnesotans in the city of Minneapolis that we are looking out for them, we could not be further off than passing however many millions of dollars in police funding on the first day of this trial. That's just simply wrong. And if the Senate sees itself as having a role providing security during this trial, we should have taken that role months ago. We could have worked together to find a balanced approach that was acceptable to both sides, in which we flushed out all unintended consequences. Instead, we decided to grandstand and lambast the idea of bailing out Minneapolis. And now I'm afraid it might be too late, and anything we do around child security may do more harm than good. Certainly, this proposal will do that. And I urge my colleagues to please vote no on this. Thank you.
Next on the list, we have Senator Gazelka, followed by Senator Champion. Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I was going to respond immediately after Senator Torres Ray to the question. I would have called it a trick question only because you have to look it up to find out, and I think the number she gave was, I think, reasonably accurate, and I thought about the idea of asking a question back and having her yield. I decided not to do that, but I also looked up, well, how many carjackings have there been in Minneapolis? How much is that up? And I'll just give the answer, depending on who you're talking to and what date you use, whether you use December or February. It's up 300% to up to over 500% carjackings in Minneapolis. And if you're a community member of Minneapolis, I'm convinced you would agree with me that we have to figure out how to stop that. And one of the solutions is you have to have enough police on the streets, both in cars and walking, that they actually have the ability to stop that. And so that's, one of the things I want to talk about as we're moving through this bill is we are providing $20 million so that there's resources available for other communities to come and help, not just Minneapolis, but frankly on the pipelines up north, or Bemidji or Wadena or wherever else there might be rioting going on, and they request more help. But when we talk about this in some way being bad or not trusting the police, I think the police know better than anyone else what resources they're going to need and how many of those resources they're going to need when they're trying to keep our streets safe. And so we're going to work with them. If you think about last year, there was a police accountability bill that we passed in a bipartisan way, and there is an additional reform here in that we're given another 6 months of training to make sure that they implement some of the things that were passed. But if we're asking for facts on the floor, you just got to give people a little bit of time to look them up.
Next on the list, we have Senator Champion,
Mr. Chair.
followed by Senator Newman. Senator Torres-Ray, for what reason do you rise?
If I may, I have a question on that point to Senator Gazelka, if I could.
Senator Torres-Ray, I have you on the list. I have 4 people on the list. We'll get back to you once we're to that point. And Senator Champion's the one that gave me the list, so just so everyone make sure that's clear. Senator Champion, followed by Senator Newman. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will just make this brief statement because our majority leader stood up and attempted to insert some information that had nothing to do with the bill in an attempt to distract from what the real issue was that was put forward by Senator Patricia Torres-Ray. Senator Gazelka, the issue is not carjacking. I don't think that's anywhere in this bill, and you all have been very clear that you want to stick to the bill itself. But it seems as if it's appropriate, or at least is deemed appropriate, to go outside of the bounds of the bill when you want to stay on message about Minneapolis. If you're going to look up carjacking, then you should look at it across the state, not just in Minneapolis. In fact, I just saw something on the news the other day where there was an attempted traffic stop in greater Minnesota, and the police had to do a maneuver in order to get the person to pull over. I'm not raising that in order to suggest that we pit one city or county against the other. And in fact, Senator Gazelka, I'm doing the opposite of what you're attempting to do at this particular time. That caused me great anguish, Mr. President. I remember to speak to you, Mr. President, because I see us as one Minnesota. I see us as supporting each other and trying to find ways by which to make sure that we all are safe and that we all are cared for. The problem with this bill is that it attempts to undermine that notion of being one Minnesota. It continues to separate us. And in fact, I'm going to go to the question that Senator Gazelka decided to ask. So if Senator Gazelka will yield for a question, Mr. President.
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Champion.
Senator Gazelka, you talked about the delay in the training that police are supposed to get through the post board. That was a part of the police accountability bill that we spent a lot of time debating on this particular floor. Senator Gazelka, can you tell me how many trainings are being offered by the post board at this time?
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President and Senator Champion, first of all, I have utmost respect for you and our dialogue that we have on many issues, including this one. They were waiting for information from the Attorney General on how to implement it, what to implement, and that came in very, very late, maybe 2 weeks ago. I mean, and so that is why they're requesting a delay, because the Attorney General did not give them the guidance quick enough. So that I'm aware of, there may be nothing that's happened because they just recently got clarification, even though we passed it last summer.
Senator
Mr.
Champion.
President, will Senator Gazelka continue to yield?
Senator Gazelka will continue to yield. Senator Champion.
Senator Gazelka, I'm not certain if you answered my question, which was how many continuing classes are being offered by the post board at this particular time. And just to help you out, that information is available on the peace officers website. Can you tell me how many classes are being offered at this time? That's one question. And then the second question is, isn't it true during this time of pandemic that we've had our young people who are in E12 doing training and being educated? And is it also not true that we have our college kids in higher ed getting training even during this pandemic?
Senator Gazelka.
Well, Mr. President and Senator Champion, well, first of all, as I reminded you, it's the Attorney General that had to give out the guidance, and I believe it would be the administration's role to provide that training. That's the executive branch. And because I haven't looked at the website and looked up that piece of information, I can't answer it. I'm sure you have, so please feel free to share that with the body.
Mr. President?
Senator Champion.
I want to thank Senator Gazelka for being clear about that. Yes, there's over 11 pages of training opportunities being conducted by the Post Board. And Mr. President, I saw that my good friend Senator Limmer was discussing something with Senator Gazelka, which is appropriate. So I'd ask Senator Limmer to yield for a question.
Senator Limmer will yield. Senator Champion.
Senator Limmer, you were the one who authored, for lack of a better word, and even though we had some real concerns about the police accountability bill, but this was a provision in that bill. Mr. President, my question to Senator Gazelka is, Senator Limmer, is whether this bill that has this provision about delaying the use of force training for police officers went through his committee, because he is the chair of the judiciary. And so if Senator Limmer would answer that question, that'd be great.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Champion, the request for 6 months delay is because the request we gave to the administration was not fulfilled, and that the course or the courses that were required under the bill were delayed because of that previous administrative delay. So in order to not violate state law, we're asking for a continuance of 6 months. It's quite simple. The goal is to fulfill that training requirement.
Mr. President,
Senator
if
Champion.
Senator Limmer will continue to yield for a question.
Senator Limmer will yield. Senator Champion.
Senator Limmer, thank you for that information, but you didn't answer my question. So, Mr. President, maybe I'll ask Senator Limmer in a different way, but the same question. Senator Limmer, this provision was a part of your police accountability bill. This is a judiciary issue. You are the chair of judiciary. Did this bill go through Senator Weber, did Senator Weber's bill go through your committee?
Mr. President,
Senator
no, it did
Limmer.
not.
Senator Champion.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, I couldn't hear his response.
Senator Limmer.
Mr. President, no.
Senator Champion.
Mr. President, if Senator Limmer will continue to yield for a question.
Senator Limmer will yield. Senator Champion.
So, Senator Limmer, my question is, if this bill did not go through your committee and it has a judiciary provision in it that speaks to such an important issue, where are you getting the information that they needed an additional 6 months? And isn't it true that the whole reason for going through a committee is for transparency, so we all can have the same information?
Senator Limmer.
Mr. President, I believe it was by those that were conducting the training, if my memory serves me correctly, they were anticipating the timeline and were beginning to realize that they could not fulfill it due to the lack of time that the Attorney General took to to finish his work, and the administration, I can only conjecture here that they also were anticipating a delay as well, because they could not fulfill their responsibility due to the delay that the Attorney General's office took.
Mr.
Senator
President,
Champion.
if Senator Limmer would yield for one more question.
Senator Limmer will yield. Senator Champion.
Senator Limmer, isn't the whole reason for the committee process is so individuals can come to the dais or the table and discuss a policy proposal and any modifications for that proposal so that we can get to the bottom of whether the offered proposal is ripe and should be given? And will you not agree that the reason why you're using words like "I believe" is because you're uncertain? Because the same mouth that can transfer truth, Mr. President, can transfer error. That's why we usually have individuals come to the table. So, Senator Limmer, my question to you is whether I have a good grasp of the rationale and the reason for committee hearings and transparency, and the reason why provisions should go through the required committee in order for the public to have this important information as to whether it's true or not that the Attorney General's office did not provide guidance in enough time, or whatever the issue may be. Senator Limmer, will you be so kind as to react to that?
Senator Limmer.
Mr. President, Senator Champion, I would find it very difficult to determine if you have a grasp on this. You asked me whether or not I can satisfy your grasp. I can't determine that. I can interpret legislative intent from our earlier bill last year. Legislative intent was to provide a specific degree of education for our law enforcement, but it was predicated on some responsibilities of the Attorney General and the administration. As you know, the Post Board is not a function of the representational branch, it's the executive branch. And legislative intent was clear. Legislative intent still is being satisfied, but because of an inaction or a delayed action by the administration, we want to continue to further the training that is required in the previous bill of last year. It's quite simple, Senator Champion.
Members, just a reminder, please address your comments to and through the President. Senator Champion.
Mr. President, based on the answer that I just got from Senator Limmer, Mr. President, I would ask if Senator Weber will yield for a question.
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Champion.
Mr. President, Senator Weber presented this bill in finance, and he made amendments onto this particular bill because it was the first stop. So there was an author's amendment, Mr. President. And as a part of that author's amendment, it's my understanding that it included not only a provision to delay the time in which training on use of force must be conducted, but it also attempted to remove the legislative intent from the police accountability bill. That's my understanding. So my question is whether, Senator, whether what I'm reciting is true, and whether the attempt to remove the legislative intent from the police accountability bill is being seen and removed from this proposal that is before the body today.
Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill simply moves that deadline back. It had no, there was no effort to remove legislative intent, but instead it was to further the timeline till a time in September, in order to allow the Post Board requirements to be met, the training to be held.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Champion.
Lastly, colleagues, I rise in opposition to this bill, and the reason why I ask these very important and basic questions is because I wanted the public and for this body to be really clear as to the path that this Senate File 1354 has taken. Process is important. You heard me ask Senator Limmer, Mr. President, a cross-section of questions because I wanted to get to the very essence of transparency. And in fact, I'll borrow a word from Senator Limmer's bill, accountability. This bill came to finance. The author's amendment was put on the bill that had judiciary provisions in it, along with other things that you'll hear about. And this bill did not go through those committees. In fact, it came directly to the floor. It bypassed the judiciary. And Mr. President, I've heard over and over again from different chairs that says that it is important for a piece of policy, no matter how vast or minute it might be, to go through the correct process in order to make sure that the public has an opportunity to weigh in and to present their viewpoint. That didn't happen here. That's disappointing, and in the spirit of transparency and consistency and accountability, I'm asking you to vote against this particular bill, because even a delay is a delay of justice and opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President, for your patience this morning.
Next, we have Senator Newman, followed by Senator Dibble. Senator Newman.
Mr. President, when we adopted the A50 amendment, we adopted a provision which I think correctly would remove a police officer from the recommendation panel, either a sheriff or a police officer, if they had a conflict of interest because the discussion involved a potential reimbursement for an area that sheriff or police officer represented. And the result is that we would be then down one member of the recommendation panel. It seems to me that, given the fact that it's a very small panel, there's only 4 individuals plus the Commissioner of Public Safety, and because the bill says that the sheriffs and chief of police that are on the reimbursement panel must represent the geographic and population diversity among the state's counties, that I believe it would be appropriate to provide for a method of replacing the member who is no longer able to participate because of the conflict. And for that reason, Mr. President, I would offer the A52 amendment.
Senator Newman offers the A52 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Newman moves to amend the Weber amendment to Senate File number 1354, adopted by the Senate March 8, 2021, as follows. Page 1, delete line 4 and insert. This is the A52 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, I think the amendment is pretty straightforward, pretty easy. If you look on the main bill, on page 4, lines 15 through 18, you will find the appointment procedures for the appointment of the 2 sheriffs and the 2 chiefs of police. The A52 amendment changes that a bit and provides for an alternative sheriff and an alternative chief who would then serve if a member of that panel was disqualified because of that conflict of interest that was adopted in the A50. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion on the A52 amendment. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I consider this a friendly amendment and urge its adoption.
Any other discussion on the A52 amendment? Seeing none, all those in Senator Champion?
Thank you, Mr. President. If the senator will yield for a question related to the amendment.
Senator Newman, will you yield for a question? Yes. He will yield. Senator Champion.
Senator Newman, based on your amendment, are you anticipating that the sheriffs are elected or are they appointed in some shape, form, or fashion?
Senator Newman.
Mr. President, Senator Champion, if you look at the original bill, beginning on line 4.15, it specifically says that the sheriffs, the two sheriffs are selected by the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, so that's a selection, as well as the two chiefs are selected by the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association. So the amendment, which is the A52, would then also select the alternatives who would then serve if a member of the original panel was disqualified. So it's a selection process.
Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that, I rise in opposition to this amendment as it gives too much power to individuals who are not elected by the people. Especially if they're looking at the people's resources, I don't see anything that would suggest that there's any accountability notion by the people. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the A52 amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. No. We will take a brief pause to gather the votes of the members in alternate locations. Members in the chamber who are voting aye, voting yes on the A52 amendment, please stand at your desk. Okay, you can please be seated. Members in the chamber who are voting no on the A52 amendment, please stand at your desk. All right, please be seated. I will call on Senator Franzen to report the total number of yes and no votes on the A52 amendment for those voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report 1 aye and 9 noes.
Senator Franzen reports 1 aye and 9 noes. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report 5 yes votes.
Senator Jasinski reports 5 yeses and 0 noes. With 35 yes votes and 26 no votes, the motion prevails and the A52 amendment is adopted. Members, we're back on Senate File 1354. Next on the list is Senator Dibble, followed by Senator Torres-Ray. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Mr. President, if Senator Gazelka would yield for a question, please.
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Gazelka. Senator Gazelka, you announced last week that this proposal might be before the Senate this week. And we learned, of course, at 9:30 last night that it was going to be, unfortunately, after we had had a lengthy conversation amongst ourselves in the DFL caucus about a tax bill that we thought was going to be before us. So at 9:30, we learned that this bill was going to be in front of us. So Senator Gazelka, you also said that this bill was going to be coming forward as a product and a function of negotiations that were occurring. And so my question is what we're looking at a negotiated agreement? My first question is, Senator Gazelka, have you been negotiating with any other parties on the language of this bill? That's one question. And the second question is, are we looking at an agreed to proposal on the part of other parties, whether that be the executive branch or the other body? I know that it's not a negotiation or a conversation that's occurred with any members of the Minneapolis delegation, because we're seeing this language all for the first time, particularly the amendment that was offered by Senator Weber. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Dibble. First of all, is there negotiations going on? The answer is yes, at least every day. In the House, there's too many Democrats that have the belief that we should defund the police, and so they have not agreed to the language that is there, and there's not cooperation yet between the two parties. And so there is ongoing conversations about what's the best way to try to get something done where we provide $20 million of resources, and that those resources are for the entire state of Minnesota, not just Minneapolis, but pipelines up north and any other place. And so the negotiations are absolutely continuing. This particular bill is not agreed upon because, frankly, in the House, they cannot even agree themselves, because too many think we should be going the other way and defunding the police, not increasing funding.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Senator Gazelka has just told us, members, that, in fact, the assurance that he gave us last week is not the case, that he would be bringing forward a bill that was the function and product of negotiations. If Senator Gazelka would yield for another question, Mr. President.
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Dibble.
Senator Gazelka, is there a reason why you kept your intention to bring forward this bill hidden from the minority caucus until 9:30 last night, after having communicated to the minority caucus that we would be dealing with a fairly substantial tax bill? That's one question. And number two, is there a reason, Senator Grzelka, why the language of the amendment offered by Senator Weber was also kept hidden from the minority caucus until the moment in which it was offered by Senator Weber on the floor of this chamber?
Senator Grzelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Dibble, members know there was no intent there. Minority Leader Kent and myself talked about 6:30-ish this morning. I would have liked for that to have been there. I had a recent conversation with Speaker Hortman, and so it's been hoping that something could come out of the House. I do believe in the end, I think it's important for Minnesota that we find a way to get an agreement, but we're going to move forward in the Senate. The fact that we can do something, I think it's important to send that message in front of the upcoming trial.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Grzelka would yield for another question.
Senator Grzelka will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Grzelka, Majority Leader. You also made a number of assurances at the opening of session that this would be a chamber committed to the free flow of ideas and civility and consideration of everyone as senators. It was fantastic. I was really excited to hear your reassurances. Senator Grzelka, would you characterize your having brought forward a bill like this of such substantial significance that has such incredible consequence for our state, for Minneapolis, for the civil order of our communities on the opening day of an extremely consequential trial? Would your having done so under the cover of darkness as an ambush and a surprise to those of us who represent those communities and those of us who represent almost half of this chamber, would you say that action is consistent with the reassurances that you made as the leader of this chamber?
Senator Grzelka.
Mr. President, Senator Dibble, and members, yes, there are going to be times that we get new information and we have to adapt on the fly. And there also will absolutely be times that we strongly disagree about a direction, and then typically the majority of each body gets to move the direction that they think we should go. But respecting each other along the way, I think, is a trademark of this body, even when we don't always do it exactly right. Certainly I would have wanted Senator Kent to have the information earlier than before 7 a.m. this morning, but that is always the intent of how we run this, the Senate.
Senator Dibble.
So, Mr. President, I will just say, I will use I language and me language for me. This feels to me disrespectful, and it feels humiliating, and I can tell you that I fear what the consequence of popping a surprise ambush bill of such significance in import this is. Mr. President, if Senator Weber would yield.
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Dibble.
So, Senator Weber, we're forced to scramble. The reason I didn't stand up and speak when I was called upon by the President was because I wasn't ready. I was still reading the bill. I was still gathering my thoughts. I was still trying to figure out what the bill even says and why some of these ideas are even in the bill, because first time I see the language in your amendment is the moment in which it was offered on the floor of the Senate. So, Senator Weber, can you please tell us why on line 22 the state agencies have been taken out of eligible entities for reimbursement of these dollars?
And before Senator Weber speaks, just so all the members are clear, Senator Champion provided me with a list of speakers, and Senator Dibble, you were first on the list, so that is why I called you. Senator Weber, to Senator Dibble's question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and Senator Dibble, the reason was that we wanted to be clear that none of this $20 million was going to cover state costs. It's certainly the anticipation of all of us that our state officers, our National Guard, our State Highway Patrol, conservation officers are all our responsibility, and that none of this $20 million would go to pay for those services that are provided there.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. So Senator Weber effectively restated what the bill contains and didn't actually answer my question, which was the reason why. Senator Weber, can you tell us why you think that's a good idea?
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Weber.
Well, Mr. President, I think it's a good idea from the standpoint that, number one, it assures local units of government, local enforcement agencies, that this money is there for their reimbursement. And number two, it also points to the fact that we as a legislature are responsible for funding those individuals and agencies that are under our and the administration's jurisdiction.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Weber would yield for another question.
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Dibble.
So, Senator Weber, I appreciate that. The bill, as originally proposed, had $35 million, which likely would have perhaps allowed for sufficient funds to reimburse those state entities that might be providing security in one of these abstract, yet-to-be-determined events. Is there a reason why the one-time appropriation was taken down in your bill originally to $15 million, but then raised on the floor today to $20 million, down from the originally proposed $35 million?
Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, the $20 million is a result of some of the negotiations that have occurred between the Majority Leader and the Speaker. Also, the $20 million is well in excess of what the estimate is from the Minneapolis commander, who is basically charged with planning for potential issues in that regard, and it was believed that there would be enough money here to deal with the issues that were in front of us, and that at some point, if it was felt that there would be additional funds needed within these next couple of years, we could provide those.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll let that rest. But, Mr. President, Senator Weber would yield for another question.
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Weber, picking up on a point that Senator Champion made earlier, we now have a panel that is going to determine whether or not applications for reimbursement will be agreed to and fulfilled. And on that panel sits the Commissioner of Public Safety, and then two sheriffs and police chiefs, with an alternate for each of those entities. So, Mr. President, Senator Weber, can you please let us know why this panel, which is a substitute for how the bill was originally proposed, would be handled similarly to the disaster account, where requests for reimbursement are simply made and handled similar to how disaster relief is made. Tell us more, if you don't mind, Senator Weber, about why this panel is the better idea, with sheriffs and police chiefs and the Commissioner of Public Safety.
Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly it is the thought that it is those individuals that understand the nature of those disbursements and can more appropriately make an opinion as to are justified or not. In addition, when the governor first made the request to the leaders, it was stated to him that there was not necessarily a great trust of his ability to be in charge of funds of money. And he told the Majority Leader at that time, then you can put whatever safeguards you wish to around it. This, quite frankly, Mr. President, is one of the safeguards.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you. So, Mr. President, Senator Weber triggered a different question in my mind until I get to my final question of Senator Weber. Senator Weber characterized those who would better know the nature of these reimbursement requests, better than whom, Senator Weber?
Senator Weber will yield, but Senator Dibble, he did not hear the question. Can you please repeat the question?
So Senator Weber, who do these folks know better than, and who are going to serve on this panel rather than having the application process go through our Department of Public Safety, whom I thought we all had a very high opinion of? Why aren't we just simply handling these as a standard matter of course? You said they know, the folks on this panel are going to know better than someone. Who do they know better than?
Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I would go back to my last answer, and that is that panel technically is part of the administration, and it was felt that it was important to have an independent panel review those expenses.
Senator Dibble.
And if Senator Weber would yield for one final question, Mr.
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Weber, two of the, and possibly three because we have an alternate, are going to be non-elected officials. What I understood as part of the explanation is we were going to have more transparency, more accountability from this panel. But of course, the Commissioner of Public Safety is not elected, and police chiefs are not elected to their position. The only individuals who are elected, who have some sort of democratic accountability for the public dispersal of funds, would be the sheriffs. So, Senator Weber, do you think that's any issue that Senator Champion raised earlier, that we're actually moving further away from any form of accountability to electeds?
Senator
or
Weber.
to the public who elect people to represent them?
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, if that is going to be an issue for us, then there are an awful lot of state agencies we're going to have to get rid of.
Senator Dibble.
Mr. President, I would simply rebut what Senator Weber says. We are accountable, as is the governor, for everything that the state agencies do and say. So there's a fairly close measure of accountability there. Members, I regret that this bill was not laid on the table, because I said in my opening comments in my line of inquiry to Senator Gazelka, our leader here, the majority leader, it was popped on us by surprise. It had the effect of feeling like an ambush. We had had an incredibly rigorous and fruitful and energizing caucus that went long to talk about significant issues to Minnesotans in this time of pandemic around our economy and their ability to prosper and thrive, or lack thereof, and what we could do to help and support them through our tax policy. And then at 9:30 we find out we're not actually going to have that discussion here on the floor. We're going to have another extremely important and very, very consequential policy debate at 9:30 on a Sunday night. So I would suggest that this is no way to do the people's business. And if you read the bill, members, the very first lines of the bill say that, which are unrelated, by the way, to the rest of the bill, a disaster does not include a catastrophe caused by civil disorder. So that has to do with the ability to access disaster relief funds in the case of catastrophic and devastating events in a community, and it's retroactive to January 1st, 2020. So any community that has received funds, I don't know, perhaps they would have to pay them back. Actually, that causes me to have a question, Mr. President, if Senator Rosen would yield. Is she in the chamber? Yes.
Senator Rosen will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Rosen, can you tell, I believe this is consistent with some language in a bill that you've carried separately. So on line 70 it says the section is effective retroactively from January 1st, 2020, and some funds have been made available in the aftermath of the civil unrest in the core cities. What does the effect of that retroactive effective date have on those funds that have already been dispersed? Do they have to be repaid, and if so, repaid by the municipality or by the individuals who have received grants?
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for the question, Senator Dibble. Yes, the $12,524,149 is in a sub-account, and it would have to be, it has not gone out to the expenses that have been deemed by the governor, but they would be repaid back into that account, Mr. President.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you. Senator Weber would yield for a question.
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Weber, why is this provision in this bill? It's not related to the law enforcement operations account. It's completely separate. It has to do with disaster relief. Why is this tacked on to Senate File 1354?
Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, it was added on because there is a disagreement with the governor as to whether he should have taken funds from that account for the purposes for which he did, and therefore it was added onto this bill.
Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Weber would yield for one final question. I promise I won't ask him any more questions after this.
Be careful what you promise, Senator Dibble.
I'll make
Senator Weber,
Murphy ask.
will you yield? He will
Yes.
yield. Senator Dibble.
So, Senator Weber, would you agree with the characterization that a provision like that in a bill like this on the first day of a trial that's likely to cause no small amount of tension in a community like mine and other communities around the state only adds to division and tension in our state and doesn't create any indication that unifies us as a state and as a people?
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, I really, at this point in time, I don't know that this provision is going to add to or detract from some of the frustrations that are felt by Senator Dibble's community or others around the state of Minnesota. I think at this point it's simply an effort to provide direction to this governor and future governors as to the what the legislature views as an appropriate use of those funds within the disaster relief account.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, members, I have an answer, and the answer to that question is yes. That a provision like this, to me, feels mean, and it feels divisive, and it feels punitive. And it frankly doesn't even belong in Senate 1354, Senate File 1354, because it's not related to the rest of the bill. Members, I don't even recognize the Minnesota that I know inside this chamber. When I last spoke on another punitive and mean measure on local government aid, I talked about the fact that the mornings after the unrest occurred was a part of the story that was never told. It wasn't told by Senator Newman in his hearings, and it wasn't picked up much on the media. And that was the literally throngs, thousands of people who showed up to help clean up and deliver food. I talked about Sanford Middle School, which is near where my mom lived, in which you couldn't even get close to the school because of the traffic jam of people who had their cars full of diapers and food and other things that people needed to take care of themselves. And those people weren't just from Minneapolis, they were from all over the metropolitan area and probably all over the state. And I also talked about how much of the mayhem and destruction of my beautiful city came at the hands of literally dozens of people from all of your districts, came to my city, came to St. Paul, and broke windows and started fires and agitated and created more of the unrest that we saw. And we have a long list of where those folks came from, and I won't read that again today. but the vast majority of those arrests were from other places and other people. And even when there was another disturbance in downtown Minneapolis, who was arrested? People from other places, from Coon Rapids, Rochester, White Bear Lake, Afton, Crystal Lake, Elmo, Inver Grove Heights, New Hope. So members, this isn't a Minneapolis matter, it's not a St. Paul matter. This is about all of us together, one Minnesota, reaching across with a supportive hand in times of trouble. The unrest didn't happen in a vacuum. It came up for a reason. And the response was equally as heartening. And the unrest was shared across communities, many, many people, some coming simply to provoke and create mayhem, who had a completely different and separate and divisive political agenda. But getting back to these disasters, Mr. President, the city of Minneapolis contributes 3.5 times more in tax dollars than it receives back. Contributes over $2 billion and receives a fraction of that back. So when members talk about protecting their taxpayers from bailing out Minneapolis, that's just simply not the case. Since 2014, we have had disasters all across the state in which we've paid out a lot of money to help repair public works, infrastructure, people's homes, people's businesses. Aitkin County, almost $800,000, almost $50 on a per capita basis. Cass County, $1.8 million, almost $64 on a per capita basis. Lake of the Woods, we paid almost $25,000, about $6 per capita. And Minneapolis has generously contributed to all of those disasters. And I'm glad for that. And those dollars I cite that Minneapolis has contributed doesn't even count the transportation dollars, the highway user tax distribution, and I can nerd out for a long time about where those dollars come from and how they go out into the trunk highway fund and the county state aid highways and the municipal state aid streets and the township roads. And they go and they help repair those county state aid highways, make them safer, make them wider, make them smoother, those municipal state aid streets. And they go to improve roads that I will never see or drive on, and I'm happy for that my tax dollars, from my efforts, and the efforts of my friends and neighbors in Minneapolis, because we're one Minnesota, we take care of each other in disasters. We take care of each other in the good times to make our economy more robust. We invest in the Minneapolis community and technical college campuses all over the state. We invest in each other's businesses. And so, Mr. President, I would just encourage a no vote on Senate File 1354. The League of Minnesota Cities is opposed to this provision. The Association of Minnesota Counties is opposed. The Minnesota Intercounty Association, because they know the kind of instability that this creates and the lack of connectedness that we have as a state. They stand up for one Minnesota. The Senate should stand up for one Minnesota. We should take care of each other. So, Mr. President, again, I stand up in dismay and shock and disappointment in the disrespectful manner in which I feel treated by the majority party in ambushing us on a day of tremendous consequence and potential tension in my community, and the substance of this proposal, which also creates division between Minnesotans. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next, we have Senator Torres-Ray, followed by Senator Osmick. Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of things, members. I just feel the urgency to stand up and clarify a couple of things, especially because my constituents who obviously have faced tremendous trauma and are really paying attention to the work that we do here in terms of facilitating funding for law enforcement and training and all of that. First of all, let me just say, there is not a bill in the House to defund the police. I'm going to say it again. There is not a bill in the Minnesota House to defund the police. That's a tagline that was put in place by activists in the streets, and it was adopted by our Republican members, and they use it time and time again. But there is no bill to do that in either body. Constituents, please understand that. And the second thing is more of a question, because Senator Gazelka said something incredibly important too, and I know that my constituents paid attention to that, and so I need to clarify that. So that's with respect to what this bill actually does. So my question is to Senator Weber, because I need my constituents to hear that, and I would like to ask if Senator Weber will yield.
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Weber, in this bill, in subdivision 1, the purpose of this bill is defined, and it says, this section establishes a state public aid program to provide cost-sharing assistance through reimbursement to local governments and state agencies during, and that was amended, I understand, during extraordinary times or unplanned public safety events that exhaust available local resources, right? That's what this line is. So, Senator Weber, my question is this, and I want my constituents to really hear your answer. What does this have to do with carjackings in Minneapolis?
Senator Weber.
Would you repeat that, Senator Torres-Ray?
Senator Torres-Ray, please repeat
Thank
your
you,
question.
Mr. President. The purpose of this bill is defined, and I would like to know where are carjackings in Minneapolis being funded? Where is the auto theft problem that we have in Minneapolis right now? You know, there are about 2,700 reports of auto theft in the Twin Cities, and my constituents are very concerned about that. So Senator Gazelka is correct on that. So I would like to know, how is this funding being used for that?
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, Senator Torres-Ray, this bill was drafted as a response to the request from the governor in order to provide money that could help local communities respond to acts of civil disturbance. The reality of it is that the normal operating everyday activities of local law enforcement would not receive any money from this particular fund. And I think that as we think about the issues that have arisen, and if there are sometimes comments that are made as it relates to Minneapolis, it stems from the fact that there was, on a local basis, actions taken by the city government to actually defund the police and to reduce their budget. And so as we look at this particular bill, this money is only for those instances in which civil disturbance does arise, and there is no money included in here that will fund the normal everyday operating expenses of anyone's law enforcement department.
Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I am confused now. So my question then to Senator Gazelka is, Senator, if you will yield for a question.
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Torres-Ray.
Senator Gazelka, you just said a few minutes ago that you were trying to help my city and the Twin Cities deal with this issue of auto theft and the reports carjackings that are taking place in my community. I think that's what I hear, and I'm pretty sure that my constituents heard that because they want help with that, right? That is incorrect then. That is not in this bill, right? You said that, Senator Gazelka, but that is not true. It's actually not in this bill. It's a question for Senator Gazelka.
Senator Gazelka?
Mr. President, Senator Torres Ray, that was really a rhetorical question to your question about how much money had been spent on police in Minnesota, which I think you said was 60 million or whatever the number was, and it was a rhetorical question back to you, basically answering your question about why is there such a large police budget, and I said, well, here's one reason: carjackings are up over 300%, which means we need more police to protect those. But you're correct, it's not part of this bill. It was a rhetorical question, really answering your rhetorical question.
Senator Torres Ray.
Thank you so much, Senator Gazelka. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. President. And just to put it in context, just to end this, I was thinking about when Senator Gazelka said that, and I was looking into how much does it cost to deploy a law enforcement officer to respond to a call such as that. There is really not good information about how much will it cost to deploy a law enforcement officer to do that. But we have some estimates, and the estimate of a time that a law enforcement officer will use to get to a response goes between $850 to $1,600, depending, on distance and time and what kind of equipment they bring. I can only imagine what kind of funding we will have to put in place to have law enforcement officers responding to 2,700 and 77 thousands of calls related to auto theft. So 25 million would do nothing. We will need about 1,000 times that number to have law enforcement officers in every block in our neighborhoods. Is that what we are asking here to do? We cannot do that. So I just wanted to put in context what we're talking about here. Not only is not realistic, it's just so inaccurate. That's not what we're trying to do. And I want my constituents to know that this is not real conversation about real reform and funding law enforcement to respond to the real issues that they face every day. It just isn't. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Next, we have Senator Osmek, followed by Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
President.
Osmek.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know how Senator Dibble wants to be accurate. I wanted to go through a little bit here in this report that I have. Because there was I'm sure it was unintentional. I would never impugn the motives of my colleague here on the floor, Senator Dibble, who I actually get along with. I wish he was still sitting in front of me, but that no longer is the case. But there was a 55-page report that was completed by the Senate during the summer. 55 pages, multiple hearings. I think I missed one of those hearings. I know that at many of the hearings, there were no members of the minority. This report dealt with the riots. Many cases, many times. There might have been one member of the minority party in this chamber that was at those, and when we actually produced the report and had the final hearing, there were no members of the minority that I can remember. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. So Senator Dibble raised a comment about majority of the individuals who were arrested were not from Minneapolis. It's not factually accurate. This report, where the Senate did its job and had multiple hearings on it, on page 13, provides the information on how many people were arrested. According to this, there were 118 arrests. 91 of them came from the metropolitan area. 51 came from Minneapolis. And in the last paragraph, it says 56% were from the city of Minneapolis of the arrests. Now, this isn't to say that there weren't other people here that were not arrested. I'm not claiming that. But to say on the Senate floor, when there is an actual report that the Senate, the Minnesota State Senate, put together, taking testimony, taking a long amount of time to factually put together, we need to quote the facts. And the facts are the majority of the people arrested, which is nobody from the minority has ever stepped forward and saying this is inaccurate. Haven't heard that one. The majority came from Minneapolis, and the vast majority came from the metropolitan area. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I know that report came from the Hennepin County Jail roster. I think that's important to document here. But this bill is not anti-Minneapolis. We see Minneapolis and St. Paul as very, very important communities for the entire state. It's never, ever been about that. But it's also acknowledging that the people of Minneapolis, the people of St. Paul, the people of Minnesota want their streets safe. They want to feel safe. They want to live safe. And the vast majority know that it comes through good men and women that are police officers helping to keep the streets safe. And so this bill is $20 million to help do that in Minneapolis, but frankly, along the pipeline and Bemidji, Wadena, wherever there are riots, that's what these resources were meant to be. But unfortunately, Mr. President, we're going to have to lay this bill over because we have deadlines this week, and those committees must meet. And so we will return this evening. We'll let folks know when to finish this debate. And so, Mr. President, I move that we lay this on the table.
Senator Gazelka moves that we lay Senate File 1354 on the table. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. We will take a brief moment to gather the votes of the members in alternate locations. The members in the chamber that are a yes on the Gazelka motion to lay Senate File 1354 on the table, please stand at your desk. You may be seated. Receiving a sufficient number of aye votes, the motion prevails and Senate File 1354 is laid on the table. Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we recess to the call of the President approximately 4:45 p.m.
Senator Gazelka moves that we recess to the call of the President approximately 4:45 p.m. Notice will be provided on an exact time. On that motion, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The Senate is in recess.